Redevelopment Agency of Salt Lake City. Today is meeting July 9, 2024. We begin this meeting with comments to the board. I would like to remind everyone about that written comments might be submitted to the RDA offices via email, mail, P.O. Box 145476, Salt Lake City, Utah 84114. You can also send us email, council.comments@slcgov.com. You can also call our 24-hour phone line, 801-535-7654. Thank you, all of you, for joining us online and in person. But before we start, I want to remind everyone about the rules of decorum, which are in place to ensure our meetings are move along well and to help everyone feel comfortable sharing their thoughts and comments. A copy of the full rules of decorum are available. If you would like to make a general comment today, we are accepting comments in person and online. Scott Corpany from our staff will moderate our Zoom and will message you with any questions about your registration. If you do not need to speak with our staff, please select. If you do need to speak with our staff, please select Scott from the list of participants. You can also raise your hand in Zoom so they contact you. Staff is handling a lot of tasks, so please limit your messages to technical issues. Taylor Hill and our staff will be calling those who wish to comment based on the order we'll receive the names. If you're in Zoom, please unmute your microphone when Taylor calls your name. We will not open our general comment period. Taylor, please start with our first comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There is no one registered to speak.
Anybody present here that wishes to comment to the board? Okay, thank you. Today we're moving on now to item 1B, which are the public hearings for today. There's not public hearings, and we're going to jump to item C, redevelopment agency business, and that is the approval of the minutes.
Mr. Chair, I move that we approve the meeting minutes of May 21st, 2024.
Second.
I have a motion by Board Member Dugan and a second by Board Member Mano. All of those in favor say aye.
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 This motion passes unanimously with those present. Item C2, resolution authorizing the mayor to execute the First Amendment to the interlocal agreement between Salt Lake City Corporation and the Redevelopment Agency of Salt Lake City and the Utah Inland Authority. At the table, we're going to welcome Nick Tarvett, Council Policy Analyst, Katie Lewis, our City Attorney, maybe Rachel Otto from the Chief of Staff to the Mayor, and it's your time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll give a quick introduction on kind of process, and then Katie, do you want to do the details? Sound good? So this is a proposed amendment, the first amendment to an interlocal agreement between Salt Lake City, the Redevelopment Agency, and the Utah Inland Port Authority. This agreement must be adopted by the RDA and the City Council, and so the way the agenda is, you'll have the briefing on this today. It's on the council work session brief as a written briefing, and then during the formal meeting, we will have an RDA and a council meeting where you can consider adopting this in both meetings.
Thanks, Nick. This is a first amendment to the interlocal agreement with the Inland Port Authority, and the purpose of it is to change the uses of the city differential, so the city tax increment that is collected on an annual basis and is generated in the Port Authority jurisdictional land. The first agreement said that money, so it's called community differential and environmental differential, and the agreement said that money would first be spent on a health impact assessment, a traffic study, and a community impact assessment. And those three studies had to be completed by the end of December 2023. As the Port Authority and Salt Lake City have worked together under the framework of this agreement, we have realized that those studies are not the appropriate use of that differential. And so this interlocal agreement changes how that money will be spent initially. And the concept is, instead of those 3 studies that I just mentioned, the parties will agree to hire a consultant to create what's called a baseline scenario. So that's essentially assessing what is happening right now on the Port Authority jurisdictional land in terms of development, and if that stayed the same, what would that area look like? And then the second step is to create a preferred scenario where that consultant or a different consultant goes out into the community, engages with stakeholders, all kinds of stakeholders that are impacted by the Port Authority, and create a preferred scenario, which is, just as it sounds, what would the city and the stakeholders in the inland port like to have happen in the Port Authority jurisdictional land. Once that preferred scenario is established, then that will be the guiding document for the expenditure of community and environmental tax increment going forward. And it will really be a matrix of options that can be developed over time and also modified over time, that will be the shared vision for how those expenditures should be made, and frankly, how the Port Authority jurisdictional land should be developed. So those are the main terms of this First Amendment to the interlocal agreement. I'm not sure if Nick mentioned, the Port Authority has already authorized execution of the agreement, and this is our opportunity to brief you as the RDA board and also the City Council, because approval will be necessary from both entities.
Dan?
Thank you very much, Katie. And I just want to express my gratitude to Rachel and the city staff and the community on the engagement we had in developing plans to allocate these resources. That was a lot of work. We had a lot of good meetings, a lot of in-person stuff. We passed that on to the Inland Port Board, and I appreciate the initial collaboration with them. But I'm just kind of sending out the message that I would really appreciate if the Port Authority and would engage the community in a more collaborative and fashion, and listen to the community, because the community is the one being impacted. And we came into this agreement so that the community would benefit. And I'm going to repeat, the community and the West Side neighborhoods would benefit. And there are times when I don't always think that's happening from one side of the table, but I really appreciate the effort that the city and the community move forward on this. So there's no question there. There's just my commentary on the discussion there. And I hope that the Port Board hears us in that the residents should be benefiting from this, and only the residents of the area. So thank you.
Thank you.
Quick question. Just trying to do a quick exercise on history here. We have gone a long way on building this relationship, a new based on trust relationship with the authority, with the Inland Port Authority, to spend this differential and to hear input from the community and our city about how to spend this money. This will create a matrix for future expenditures. What is the process if the Inland Port Authority or us disagree about a given expenditure there? Is there a process to say, well, this is not what the matrix says that we should be spending money on?
That's a great question. And as you can imagine, on any given year, even after the preferred scenario is completed, there will be likely more projects that are suggested than money available. And that certainly is the case even now under the current interlocal agreement. And the process will remain the same as it is under the current interlocal agreement, where the Northwest Quadrant Review Committee, which is the group of engaged stakeholders that Councilmember Dugan mentioned, will establish a list which is the city priorities. The Port Authority staff can either agree with those priorities or establish their own list of priorities, and then both are submitted to the Port Authority Board. They are required to hold a public meeting and a public hearing to consider those lists and then make a choice based on the two lists. So it is hopefully a collaborative process, but if there's disagreement, then both are submitted to the board.
Yeah, and it is okay, and that answers a little bit of that. Obviously, the trust and to Board Member Dugan's point, the importance of listening to Northwest Quadrant voices and the voices of the community is important here, and I hope that it still hold until the end. And certainly, we want to build something together that lasts and that is beneficial for every member of the community in the area affected. Certainly, I struggle with listening to the recommendations from the Northwest Quadrant and seeing that list of requests, and many of those requests, not getting a minute of conversation, and other requests that were not even part of it being recommended for funding. So obviously this whole process, I struggle with it still because I want to make sure that the voices of the table are heard and the community is heard. But I appreciate that we are going to have a better, more robust matrix that fits with the funding. So any other? Thank you for walking me through that. Helps me probably get some of that out and also understand the process. Any thoughts about any other thoughts about this item? Okay, we're going to be possibly taking action later tonight at the 7 p.m. meeting. Thank you so much for that. Moving on to item C3, Resolution USA Climbing Property Disposition at approximately 310 South, 500 West. And this is a follow-up meeting. Danny Waltz, RDA Director, coming into the table. Karen Lindsay, RDA Deputy Director, also at the table, and Ashley Ogden, Senior RDA Project Manager, joining us. It is your time now.
All right. Hello, good afternoon. Thanks for having us back. Last month we gave a full presentation on this proposal, so this time we'll keep it short and sweet with a refresher on the requested action and potential next steps. Next slide, please. So today we are requesting that the board consider approving the proposed ground lease terms contained in the packet, which would facilitate the construction of USA Climbing's headquarters and national training facility in the Rio Grande District. Next slide. Just a reminder on the potential next steps. If the resolution is approved, the RDA and USA Climbing will first enter into an exclusive negotiation agreement to memorialize both parties' commitments until the final agreements can be executed. USA Climbing would then refine the project design and launch a funding campaign to support construction costs. During that time, the RDA would coordinate with USA Climbing on the design and construction of the district-wide public improvements that will surround their site. When all the conditions contained in the term sheet are met, both parties will execute ground lease and development agreements. And there is one additional milestone missing from this slide, which is the requirement that staff provide a report to the board after those agreements have been executed. So we would come back and let you know when that happens. So with that, we're happy to answer any questions. I do have the slides from last time handy in case we need to revisit any of those. Thank you.
Mr. Chair. So thank you for coming again. Last time we were here, I asked some questions, and I think I'm going to ask them the same way, but maybe they're slightly different questions. My questions are: what happens? Are there any provisions in the lease or in this agreement of what happens if USA Climbing is not successful? What does success actually mean? Is it a number of visitors that come to the district? Is it financial success? And are there those metrics in there? If so, what are the remedies for them not being successful? Because when I look at this project, I think this is very critical land. I have been wanting something to go here for a very long time. So the fact that there is an organization ready to go there in and of itself is exciting. I do think as the city, we're giving a lot and expecting quite a bit in return in terms of activating the neighborhood. And so I'm just wondering what happens if it doesn't activate the neighborhood? How do we define that? And then how do we get that back? And the reason why I think it's important for this is because this isn't assuming it gets so far as to executing the lease agreement and building the structure. It's not a structure that's easily adapted to a different use in the future. So I'm worried about how much money and investment goes in, and then if the organization is not successful, what do we do with that property? So can you help talk me through, I know those are very negative scenarios, but I think it's our job to consider those. So can you help talk me through that?
Sure. Yeah, so in the term sheet, we do say that, the proposed lease abatement is tied to USA Climbing providing certain community benefits, and if they're not provided, the lease rate will increase, and we will further define that. We intend to further define that in the future agreement, specifically the lease agreement. And we did redline the term sheet from last month to this month to include a term that will require the RDA to look into USA Climbing's projected operating pro forma, just to ensure that basically they have a solid business plan, that they will continue to be successful and in operation into the future, so we don't end up with a situation that you described where we have a very single purpose building on our property that we now own. I don't know, Dan.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. I think depending on what the breach is, as Ashley mentioned, the term sheet calls out what are a variety of remedies based on what happens and when it happens in the process. So that can cover everything from a full-blown termination of the lease to injunctive relief to increasing the lease terms or any other remedy available at law. So all of that is built into our standard agreements. We will have those tied to performance of USA Climbing and development of the site. So based on if and when there is any breach or fault, we have the remedies available to us to respond.
But is breach only defined as they're not paying their lease, or are there other terms in it like they're not holding X number of events, or they're not attracting X number of visits to the district, etc.? Like, is there, because this is not a lease where the reasons why we would approve this lease are not because we're going to get X number of dollars per month from the USA Climbing. It's because we want USA Climbing there to activate the neighborhood. So what terms in the lease relate to activation of the neighborhood? Does that make sense?
It makes sense. We will define those in terms of what the baseline expectations are for activation in terms of number of events, but we don't get into necessarily the level of how many visitors do they have and or how many people they draw to the neighborhood. One, because those are difficult to track, but two, because that has not been necessarily subject to what our participation is. But that is inherent in their business plan. As Ashley mentioned, we do have those community benefits that are benchmarked and brought back to us every 5 years. And so we can incorporate those type of expectations and activation within those components of the agreement.
And do we have a specific number of events, or you said that comes at a future point when we define that?
Yeah, and the term sheet right now indicates it's anticipated that USA Climbing will host 6 multi-day competition events per year, in addition to smaller events associated with their programming. They'll also make the plaza available for use by the city or community. For the city, it would be free or at a discounted rate for other, I believe, neighborhood users. And yeah, that would be fleshed out further in our future agreements, but also that 5-year community benefits plan that Danny referenced.
Okay, so maybe my next question is, the future agreements is this the only time that it comes to the board for approval? Are those other future agreements administrative, or is this a multi-step vote that we're taking as the board?
This would be, I believe, the only official vote, because all of the proposed terms are outlined in the term sheet in the packet, and those would all be incorporated into the lease and development agreements.
Thank you. I
The
think that's all.
5-year plan will be presented to the board, though. However, the specific approval every 5 years will be administrative, but it will be presented to the board.
Okay. Thanks. I think that's all my questions.
Any other thoughts? Okay. We need action on this item. Before anybody feels, the moment to make some motion, I think that this is a transformative moment for for that area of the west side of downtown. So I'm very excited to see something happen in the Rio Grande area, and I'm very excited to see the activation and some shovels on the ground after so many years of big dreams from this city. So anybody feels to make a motion right now?
Mr. Chair, I move that we approve the resolution authorizing the ground lease rate and terms for the USA climbing headquarters and national training facility at approximately 310 South, 500 West.
Second.
I have a motion by Board Member Dugan and a second by Board Member Lopez Chavez. Any discussion on this item? Okay, I'm going to call the question. All of those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Okay, we have, yes, 4 positive, 1 nay, and 2 absent. And these motions carries. We're moving on to, there is no report or announcement from the executive director, or is it? And there is nothing to report from the RDA staff. I always get confused by those titles. They silly. Report from the chair of the vice chair. Do you have anything to report? Okay. And there is no written briefings. There is no consent, and there is a tentative closed session. There is actually a closed session. Anybody would like to make the motion? Use the highlighted portion of that.
I move that we enter into closed session for the discussion of disposition, acquisition, or lease of real property and advice of counsel.
Yes.
Second.
Okay, have a motion to close the session by Board Member Petro and a second by Board Member Dugan. I'm going to call the question one by one. Board Member Mano.
Yes.
Board Member Lopez Chavez.
Aye.
Board Member Dugan.
Yes.
Board Member Petro.
Yes.
And I'm a yes. This motion carries unanimously. We are in closed session right now, and we're going to reconvene as the Salt Lake City Council. At what time, Madam Chair? Depends.
It depends on when closed session. 3:30 at the latest.
Yes, it could be, I would imagine about 3, but it would depend on how long the closed session lasts, so.
We don't have any tentative.
Right, and I think we could just say for the public that when the council returns, they'll be returning as the city council.
Thank you.
Okay, that's it then. Thank you.